All right, here we are. We're back, episode two
Two?
of Called Out,
Yes,
and
and we're really excited.
this
Very honored special guest. I've been looking forward to this.
yeah, this Ken was very integral in us coming to Orthodoxy.
Yes.
If it wasn't for Father, then I don't know where we'd be. We're lost.
Yes.
Sheep out in the wilderness.
Yeah.
So
glories to all God. You would have found your way home eventually.
Yes, it just would have been a little bit
it would
longer.
have been a bumpier road.
Probably.
Yeah.
Father Ken, so,
Yeah.
like we were talking about, this is going to be your episode. You've got some stuff.
Right.
So
Yeah, I mean, I have quite a
we've
bit to
got a
say.
lot of people that are new to us, that are kind of following our mission now, that may not know who you are. So how about real quick, you just introduce us to you?
Yeah. Before we start, I need to say something. First of all, I'm not here to burn anything down. I'm not here for drama. I'm not here because I'm angry, though I've been, and I'll be honest about that too. I'm here because I spent years in the world that I gave everything to, like my time, my platform, my ministry, my energy, my identity. I built things in that world that were real. I helped people who were genuinely suffering, and I opened doors for communities that had been completely ignored, and I paid a price for all that, and I'm still paying for it right now. And so now that I'm on the other side of the paranormal field, canonically, theologically, and personally, I can actually see it clearly for the first time. And as Christians, we have an obligation to say what we see, not because we enjoy saying it, because it's true. And in the Orthodox tradition, we don't apologize for telling the truth. So if something I say lands today with the audience, if you hear it, if you hear yourself in it, that's not me targeting you. That's a mirror. I'm responsible for the mirror. What you see in it, it's between you and God. And everything I say today, I say first about myself, because I lived this, I was this. And the only reason I can speak about it with authority is because I paid the price for it, and I'm still learning. So,
Amen.
yeah.
I think that's an important thing to mention in all this is we're not trying to call anybody out in a negative way. We've been there. We've all been there in this road. So and I think your mission now too is to let's get people out of the paranormal. Let's let them into the light in a loving way, not in a hateful, hey, what you're doing is wrong. But now let's
being charitable. Being charitable is always the best thing. I mean, and the beautiful thing about the Orthodox faith, as we're learning, still being in transition, catechumenate, formation, baptism, we understand that the church is a place for healing. We're all sick, we all have a disease, and the church provides that healing. And so it's not our job to judge or condemn other people. Like it says, come see for yourself. And so we're speaking about the paranormal field, but we're doing it in a loving way, because I feel at the same time, it is a really dark bond. It is a really dark chain that has a lot of people tied into it, and people are not willing to let go. So I would say it's like an addiction.
Yes.
And when you first told us that, put it that way, describe it that way, I was like, wow, that's probably the most accurate way I can think of to describe it. Is you're addicted to that, the investigation. You're addicted to that discovery, if you will.
It's true. I mean, and for us, we're veterans, that's not background information, that's foundational to everything that comes after it. The military didn't just give us skills, it forms our character in specific ways that follow us in every room that we walk into. So the thing is, that's the draw, the paranormal field, the organization, that is the draw. You're looking for something to do. You're looking for something to be a part of, because you have values, and they're not abstract. We live those dailies. We have discipline. We wake up to a chain of command. We go to sleep inside one. And those are virtues, but they're also precisely the psychological profile that high control organizations know how to exploit. You can trust the chain of command. You believe those above you have a broader picture, and you have this subordinate personal doubt to institutional mission. So, I mean, it is what it is.
So tell us, if you will, how you got started into all this and into the paranormal field. Where did it begin for you?
Well, I mean, for me, it came out of seminary school. My call to ministry, I felt like it was genuine. The call was real, God was real, the desire to serve. And the seminary gave me scripture, pastoral care, the language, and like the architecture of ministry. And I've got a couple of things that I've earned along the way, some religious accolades or whatever, but that's what kind of got me into it. Um, Coming from that Western mindset, first of all, being New Yorican, we are tied in. New Yorican, what's that? Puerto Rican, born and raised in New York. My family is of Puerto Rican heritage, and we have this deep spiritual connection to the afterlife. There is Santeria, there's Culanderia, there are also the Christian faith. And so I think that's kind of what drew me into it, because I had these experiences growing up that were scary and dark and demonic in nature, and I wanted to know more about what it was. And so, kind of like everybody else, though, started off with the shows, right? Went to like the abandoned buildings, and you start buying equipment. And this was like maybe 2008, right? You buy the equipment, you see the sci-fi channel shows, and you go out exploring. And so for me, that was always kind of a draw, like, whoa, you can do these things, like you can communicate with things, like these people are going out and actually helping people. And from the Western mindset, you're like, oh, that's pretty cool. That seems like a genuine ministry. It seems like a genuine call. But as you get older and you grow in wisdom and you get discernment, you realize it's not really what it's cut out to be.
Yeah.
So that's how I kind of got into it. And then I became part of the Warren Legacy Foundation, right? And everybody knows Ed and Lorraine Warren. Everybody knows that, within the paranormal field, they left a lasting impact. So when I joined the foundation, I was a regular investigator. I was recruited by two individuals. I came into the foundation as this need of wanting to help and wanting to serve in a pastoral way. So like my entry into the paranormal, it wasn't necessarily through like celebrity or curiosity. It was that pastoral need, and I saw something. I saw that there was a need of Spanish speaking communities who had nowhere to turn to. The sci-fi channel shows, and I don't mean to be racist or anything like that, but it's like a lot of American only English speaking investigators out there. And so I have a language, I speak Spanish, and I saw that that community was being underserved. So I've reached out and I've helped out many Puerto Rican families, Mexican families, Colombians, Costa Rica. So, I was involved in that field for many, many years. I would say professionally, if that's even a thing, 5 years. But throughout all of that, I would say about 15 years involved in what we would call investigations in that sense. And before that, I was a Protestant pastor, and I preached at a church. Something was missing, and I decided that I was going to go through seminary school, and that calling came through, and here we are years later. And then I would say that's the thing, at the beginning, this field, it felt like ministry. It felt like we were going into where the church wasn't going, serving the people that the church wasn't serving, and that feeling, it wasn't entirely wrong. The need was real, the people were real, and the suffering was real. But what was wrong was the framework that I brought in, essentially incomplete, ungrounded, without the full sacramental authority required.
So how long did you work with the Warren Legacy Foundation? You said about 5 years.
I worked at the Warren Legacy Foundation for 5 years. I was part of the board of directors. I was also the Spanish speaking division director. I was a regional director and essentially the general manager. So I mean, what does that mean? The board of directors. I had direct oversight over the foundation's global operation. in charge of the regional leadership structure, case management standards, and the organization's culture. And so I had those responsibilities. And even with the Spanish division director, uh, it didn't mean I just translated the content. It meant that I built an entire parallel organization, uh, you know, for a demographic the mainstream paranormal world almost completely forgot. So there was the War and Legacy Foundation, and there was the Spanish subdivision. And so, with that, along with the help of other individuals, we built this parallel organization in Spanish with over 45, 50 members and worked over, we would say cases, but I mean, requests, needs for help. I would say within that 5 years, over 200 requests for help. And also finally at the end, I was the general manager for 2 days. So
For two
after I
days.
decided I was going to jump ship, so I went as a board of director. I was a Spanish division director. I was a regional director and a general manager, and so I worked my way up. So,
Yeah.
but we're going to get into the nitty gritty now, right? Because I
Right.
think this is what people don't want to hear. I want to talk about something that doesn't get discussed in the paranormal, you know, because most people don't understand organizational governance. They don't know how to recognize it when it's being done to them. And it was done to me. So I served as a board member of the War and Legacy Foundation. And I want to explain what that is supposed to mean, because what it's supposed to mean and what it actually meant in practice were two completely different things. So a board member, is the governing body of the organization. That means fiduciary responsibility, strategic oversight, the authority to hold leadership accountable to protect the mission, right? We were there to ensure that the organization operates with integrity. And so the management reports to the board. And that's not a style preference. That is the foundational principle of how every legitimate organization is supposed to function. What the CEO of the Warren Legacy Foundation did, and I don't say this out of bitterness, but it's out of factual accuracy, was he inverted the structure entirely. Foundation managers were given more authority than the board members over the very functions the board was supposed to oversee. And the board members were made to report to those managers because at the end of the day, it was his foundation and he was never going to surrender it. Um, and that's what happens when you have control. So
Mhm.
we were given title, responsibility, reputational risk of board membership without the authority. So
Mhm.
those things are supposed to, have that. So when
Yeah.
something went wrong, the board members were visible and accountable, and the people who actually made the decisions were insulated. So
Oh,
this
okay.
is, by definition, textbook founder control manipulation.
Mhm. Yeah.
So is that was that was responsible for you leaving, exiting the foundation?
That was one of the things. A lot of that within that organization, a lot of wonderful people, and I'm not speaking ill of anyone. There are just wonderful people that I still maintain relationships with, friendships with, who signed up for this cause. After a while you begin to see inconsistencies, and then after a while too, you begin to be devalued. You basically you're used is what happens, right? You're used. You're used. And everything you put into it, everything you invest into an organization, it's pretty much it's inverted, and then you're the reason things aren't working out. But there were other things more personal in nature that decided that helped me make that decision of wanting to leave. And I've mentioned it on one of my posts, and it's still on my Facebook. There was financial inconsistencies. There was me being silenced. I was actually disrespected for being a Hispanic minority leader. I had one of the managers run a background check on me without my permission, try to use those things against me on their social profile to call me out. And there was just things that were just happening that were like, whoa, you know, no one is saying anything about it. There is abuse happening, but the moment you bring it up, oh no, it's all in your head, it's all in your mind. And so I finally saw, you know, and I'm a big person. I'm big on keeping my word. I say what I mean and I do what I say. If you tell me you're going to do this, I'm going to take your word for it. And if you take your word back, hey, no problem. But just be honest about it. Don't lead people along. Don't string people along thinking that this is what's going to happen when in reality you've already offered those things you were promised to other individuals who have been less. Why? Because you weren't ready. Okay, I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready to be CEO, but yet I was running the Spanish division without any problems. I was the one making all the problems go away. I made lawsuits go away. I made things happen so that the CEO of that foundation could continue to try to broaden the mission. And this is truth. You know, uh, I got tired of it. And then when your faith is being silenced, when you can't pray or you can't wear whatever it is that you need to wear to identify what your clerical role is, little things like that, little minute things like that, you begin to see, yeah, it's not happening. And more importantly, what were we actually doing? And I think that's the bread and butter of this conversation, specifically with the foundation. I think out of all the people we help, I'm grateful and I thank God that we were able to somehow help them. But in reality, you have different ideologies, different methodologies. You have a pastor without a religion and all these things, and you're trying to put in neuroscience and all of these different things into this ideology that's false. I mean, what are we really doing? How are we really helping people? Giving them a tiki rain dance, telling them to go and surround themselves with the white light, to go put their bare feet in the grass and everything is going to be okay. I mean, it's just ridiculous. It was a theology. Everybody had their own theology, and that became problematic as well.
So you were being, oh, what's the word? You were being you silenced and told what you can and cannot do while you were in legacy, as far as what to wear, couldn't pray, you couldn't be
Yeah,
king.
I mean, yeah, there were certain things that I couldn't do. I mean, and a lot of it, had to do with the restructuring of leadership. You know, there, there was a point in time where I told the CEO, because there were several individuals, three of us, we were running this organization by ourselves. We were helping the CEO run it. We were doing interviews, we were doing background checks, we were doing case logs, analysis. We were doing everything. We were creating Word documents, legal documents, that sort of thing. But we were just getting overwhelmed. And so we asked the CEO to help us out with something, as far as like, we need managers, we need leaders, individuals who are dedicated to a specific job. And so that happened. But when that happened, it kind of just threw everything off balance. Even being a board member, it's like, okay, I have to report to a manager. When I'm the Spanish division manager, I have to run this by him or her. Not a problem. Okay, that's fine. I have respect for those individuals. I love them, but it just became problematic in the sense where even then, those managers were being used as well.
Mhm.
So kind of jump ahead here just a little bit, but I'm going to come back. Now
Yeah.
that you made your exodus from the paranormal, looking back on all of this, does it, with a clearer mind now, does it change your viewpoint on why you think certain things were happening?
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately God was in control, and I think that the paranormal field is operating on dangerous territory. There is no theological and scientific framework. Let's be honest. You know, there isn't. And the moment you try to insert theology, oh, you're being too Christian. Oh, no, no. Or I used to be Catholic and I fell away, or whatever.
Been
It's too
being a
Christian.
spiritual narcissist?
Yeah, you can't be doing that. You can't be doing that because it's too Christian. But gosh darn it, the church has over 2,000 years of experience in the supernatural, recorded through the lives of the saints, recorded through scripture, recorded through sacred theology, recording through the experiences that we have to know to be the truth, right? And so people want to dismiss the truth, and they want to come up with their own ideology, their own wackadoodle ideology. And, oh, it's okay, just go ahead and burn sage you burn the sage, and the sage is going to get rid of the evil spirits. And forgive me, I'm going to control my emotions in a sense, and I'm going to try to allow the Lord to speak, because I do feel myself now getting a little bit arrogant. But I'm gonna cut back on it, because it is true though. You see the way the field is, you see the way it operates, and what are we really doing? All of this equipment that we have doesn't do what it says it's supposed to do. How can an EMF meter detect a spirit, an immaterial object that has not even been quantified by science, right? How can it? How can a thermal camera, catch a ghost? And if you do, I'm sorry to say, it's either a reflection or it's demonic, because the demons have been at this for over a millennia. They know how to manipulate and mimic humanity. So what you think you're communicating with is either your mind or something much more sinister. There is no Aunt Jackie or Uncle Joe there's none of that stuff. All right. Because it says in the scripture fully that when we die, we await judgment. We don't die and come back and haunt houses.
That brings up a good topic, good question to maybe you can expand on.
Yeah.
Familial spirits. Am I saying that right? Familiar spirits. What did I say with that?
It's okay.
Familiar spirits. Can you
Right.
on what that is?
Yeah, I mean, so like if you would have asked me 9 months ago a familiar spirit, I would have given you that Western answer. I would have given you the answer that everybody wants to hear. Oh, a familiar spirit is a spirit that accompanies you and it guides you, and it's just a friendly spirit. It's not. There are no such thing as familiar spirits. The problem is we try to intellectualize spirits, right? That's the problem of the Western mindset. We want to understand, and we want to control, and we want to intellectualize everything, and we want to give everything a name to make us feel good. But I'm sorry to tell you, there is no such thing as a familiar spirit. It is a demonic entity, simple as that, and that is the truth. Okay? You're either going to trust the church's teachings over 2,000 years with recorded evidence and experience, or you're going to understand or try to lean on your own terminology, on your own subjective feelings. Because if we're going to lead by that logic, then maybe that familiar spirit for you, not a familiar spirit for me. Maybe it is what's the word in the movie? It's a poltergeist.
Poltergeist.
Well, no, it's a familiar. Well, how do you know? Because that's my interpretation. Well, my interpretation is a poltergeist. You see what I mean? How can there be multiple interpretations? And that also leads into this fallacy of the ecumenism and this whole paranormal unity.
Yes.
So getting back to the apostle, oh God, where was my head at? Getting back to the Warren Legacy Foundation, you were starting to see yourself wanting to get out of that foundation. You haven't made your exit yet, but you were working on other things on the background.
Yeah,
what
right.
was that?
So I would say this, because there were great moments in that organization, and I'm not saying that it was all bad. It was just towards the end. That I started noticing things. And I think a lot of that also had to do with where my mind was. There was a point in time where I was accused of being arrogant and egotistical. And you know what? I will accept that. I will accept that. But that broke me completely to where for like 6 or 7 months, I didn't want to work on any cases. I didn't do anything. I just handed over everything to my assistant regional directors because I was so hurt by what was being projected on me as well. Here's a young man, I was never trying to be the face of any organization, but I came out on the podcast and everybody knew me and people were drawn to me because of my story. And so I built quite a following. So that was very shattering for me. And so that kind of left me in seclusion for 6 months. And the feelings just started, just working inside of me. But at the same time, too, I was dealing with other parallels. I was in this order, and like I said, the call to ministry was genuine. The call was real. God was real. The desire to serve was real. So, but the problem is, I was a part of this order. I was ordained within an order that is now defunct and invalid. And I'm going to say that plainly because I spent way too long not saying it plainly, and that silence served no one. So, what does invalid mean? It means that whatever was conferred on me, whatever title I carried, whatever authority I believed I held was not recognized by any church, anything rooted in apostolic succession that traces itself without interruption back to the apostles. Because that line was broken. They'll say, well, it's the Descartes line, or, it's the Utrecht Council. And a broken line cannot transmit what no longer carries, right? So I laid hands on people. I presided over sacraments. I exercised authority I did not actually possess. And I did it all with complete sincerity, which makes it more painful to face. But sincerity is not the same as validity, and the two things have nothing to do with one another. So I was facing that as well too, because at the same time, within this foundation, within this organization, I was circumnavigating this priestly ministry. I started to see the red flags. The founder of the order passed away, which kind of left us with nothing. Whatever apostolic succession he had was gone, and the order became just that, the Solomonic Order of St. Michael the Archangel. It just became this online independent Catholic ministry. Now, well, it's okay. It's independent Catholic. You're stepping away from the church because the church doesn't want to do anything to help. So it's important that we have these independent committees. And that is a fallacy. That is a false logic. Because if you're not connected to the source, if you're not connected to the tree, there's no authority. And so I found myself contemplating that, and then, episcope vagante. There even came a point in time where I was appointed as an archbishop. Could you imagine that? Wow. I went from deacon to priest in 7 months, and then a year later, I became an archbishop.
Climbing that ladder.
I went to a Protestant seminary. I had no idea what that was. Like for us in the Protestant church, like a bishop was always like a senior pastor. And so I carried that title with arrogance and ego. Oh, look at that. I'm an archbishop. I didn't want to do it. I didn't want it, but I carried it. And then the cracks started to show. And, I'm not going to say their name, but there was a person, a couple who used to be part of the foundation. And they went on and they did a podcast on their YouTube. And they specifically called me out, and they showed an interview of me doing an exorcism or whatever it was, right? So I still have certain disagreements with that. But even in hindsight, at the end of the day, I should have not been doing any prayers of deliverance. I should have not been doing any of those things because I had no authority. What ended up happening is that the Holy Spirit used them in a way to where that sat within me for 6 or 7 months. Like it bothered me. Like, how could you attack me? Why would you say these things about me? I've been nothing but kind and decent. But he wasn't attacking my character. He was attacking that vocation, that false ministry, this facade that I had. Because at the end of the day, when I started doing the research and I started digging in and I started looking at the things that were actually being said about me, and I looked at this order, something clicked. My gosh, this guy was right. I am the most ignorant, arrogant, stupidest son of a gun there is. How can I sit here and say that I'm an archbishop, that I'm an independent Catholic priest, when we're not tied into any church structure at all? But here's the beauty. Here's the beauty of the fallacy at first. We had a church building. We had the vestments. We had all of this stuff. We had the actual location. And so when I was brought into this order, it seemed legitimate because we had this space. And I always kept on asking. I go, well, can I just go down to the local Catholic church and do the sacraments? And I kept on getting the excuse, oh, no, you can't do it. I go, why? I'm a Catholic priest, right? And they're, oh, no, because they don't like us, because we get to build our own ministries. It was always some sort of deflection, right, of why. And it just started eating me alive. And but by the grace of God, that YouTube video helped me realize that this whole time I was wrong. A lot of the work that I was doing, the prayers that I did, the homes that I went into, I had no authority. And I repent to God, right? Because here's the thing. I had the credentials. I have the religious degrees and master's in pastoral counseling, a doctorate in theology and divinity. I am actually a board certified mental health coach. I'm a military veteran, So what was the problem? Why are you attacking me? But, the truth is the truth. And so, that was happening in the background as I was also dealing with the War and Legacy Foundation, and I was also part of other groups. I helped out this other group called AMIPSO, which is another international group based out of Uruguay. And I was involved deeply in the Spanish community. People knew me. People knew who I was. I had reach. I've been to countries virtually that I would never travel physically, to Spain, to Colombia, to Uruguay, to Costa Rica. I mean, people were just genuine, and I did a lot of talks. I did a lot of interviews. I even wrote a stupid book that I'm going to remove from the market, because now I realize that everything that I did, everything that I thought I was, wasn't who I was. And that's a tough pill to swallow. That's a tough pill to swallow. And then the saving grace came. I have a friend who's an Anglican hierarch. And I said, look, Father, this is what I'm going through. This is what happened. And so I became part of the Anglican Communion, which now the ordination was valid, because the Anglican Communion is a recognized Christian body that also has a form of apostolic succession, but they also have the sacraments. They view the sacraments. And so that was a saving grace. And for 2 years, we came under that governing body, and I learned everything that I had been missing, you know. And I tell you what, they were very scrupulous. When I went into that, when I joined this Anglican Communion, I interviewed with a board of 5 other clergy. We had to talk theology. We did background checks. I had to do essays. They gave me this entry level, not entry level, but doctoral level thesis questions that I had to answer on the spot with paperwork to support what I had already known. And when I experienced it, I go, wow, this is the real thing, you know, and I became valid. And so that was a saving grace. So then I had a spiritual authority. And so that kind of just kept me in line and check for a little while. And yeah, you know, here I am, this guy with 2 parallels. You know, I'm involved in this Christian ministry, working in the paranormal, and it was okay with my leadership, my hierarchs, because in the West, you know, the paranormal was viewed as something, well, you know, really not that serious, really not that dangerous. We know ghosts exist. We know demons are real, but we know that not everything is a demon. Oh, how many times have we heard that? And Lord have mercy on me. Because I've led a lot of people astray by saying not everything is demonic, when in fact the reality is 90% of things, almost 99% of them, are demonic, or are imagination, or is confirmation bias. So,
Yes,
man, to tell you something, man, I'm just a broken man circumnavigating this life, and I've made a lot of mistakes. And I'll be the first to admit, you know, I've got to be accountable for the things that I've done, and that's why I'm very grateful to be on the show. And what more importantly, I'm grateful to the both of you. I'm grateful to the friends that I've had throughout the years, and the people who have followed me and supported me. You know, and I'm grateful specifically to the both of you as well too, because throughout this transition, you guys have been there supporting me. You guys never judged me. You guys never said, well, screw this guy, we're done with him, blah, blah, blah. You know, in the midst of me being accountable and saying the things that I did wrong because I was operating out of ignorance, I think that's where this relationship flourished even more between all of us.
You know, we all kind of walked this path unknowingly together at the same time.
Yeah.
I within weeks of each other, of, you know, making the call to each other and say, hey, we're out.
Yeah.
You know,
I
don't remember who said it first, but it was within, you know, days of each other at the same time, of realizing what was going on. And then we went ahead and popped smoke, if you want, you know?
Yeah.
So,
I mean, that's interesting. I mean that, you know, it's very interesting because, you know, it's like we're all going through this transition, and let me tell you something. Everything that I thought I knew, man, you don't know nothing. Orthodoxy just completely humbles you, and it surrenders you. You know, so in the midst of that, I was also part of this Holy Sword apostolate network with Father Bob, and I love him very much. He's a dear friend. I consider him a brother. He's a retired Roman Catholic priest, but I've softened this story before, and I'm not going to soften it today because I say this with love and I say it with honesty because both things are possible at the same time. You know, Father Bob and I, we built the Holy Sword Network, clergy network. He has the apostolate. We built the network, right, out of what I genuinely believed was a calling from God. Because why? Because the paranormal field was full of people in genuine spiritual crisis, genuine demonic oppression, genuine need, and the church was nowhere to be found. At least I thought. At least I thought. The vision was real, and it was right, you know. To bring genuine apostolic ministry into those spaces, not investigators with collars, priests, ministers of the church with actual sacramental authority, and so that was the whole idea. And so, for about a year, this is what I gave to the ministry. Also, I do want to point out that, I was part of Wardruna and the Warren Society, which I'm no longer a part of. I'm no longer part of anything paranormal, but those people in those groups, they know me. I love them personally. I know them well, and they know that if they ever need prayer or guidance, they can always call me. And so, kind of like that's where I'm at right now. It's like, look, don't come to me with your paranormal problems. We're going to pray it. We're going to instruct you to go to the church. We're going to instruct you to take the sacraments. And I'm going to tell you, straight up, don't hire any teams. You don't need any stinking paranormal investigation team, right? So, a quick shout out to those other groups as well. But with that Holy Sword Network clergy apostolate, I gave to the mission specifically. I shut down my ministry page. A year of work. I cultivated an audience. I was a presence that represented an enormous underserved community of Spanish. It was time, my credibility, my energy. I shut those things down willingly. I shut down my church page, same sacrifice. I built a network. I did the outreach. I created the pages. I handled the administrative architecture. I used my credibility in the field, in the paranormal world, specifically in the Spanish communities to broaden the ministry landscape, to give this network, a standing. Otherwise, it would have not had, and I gave everything that I had, and not from ego, not to be seen, because I believed in it, because I was doing everything I knew to be a better man, to be a better priest, a better servant of God, and it just didn't work out, but that leads into something, because I think people need to understand the dynamic and why. When I say these things, I'm not saying it out of malice. I'm not condemning or judging anyone. I truly love people and I care about them. But the truth, doesn't mean that we soften things down. It needs to be said plainly, because it goes to the heart of what eventually I believe broke the network, right? The paranormal padre, one name, two shadows. I have been the paranormal padre, not as a title I claimed, as a name the Spanish speaking community gave me through the years of this work. It's tied into my culture, my language, my military background, my pastoral identity, and over a decade of visible language, a visible ministry in the Spanish paranormal field. So people always called me the paranormal padre. People always call me Padre Ken, el Padre Paranormal, but also too, to my dear brother, Father Bob, has also carried that name. He got that name from, Ed and Lorraine Warren. He worked with them. He works with Nesper. He's a wonderful individual, but at the same time, he wasn't in that public view as I was. I was in places I haven't even traveled to physically. I was in Puerto Rico, Mexico, Colombia, Argentina, Uruguay, all of these Spanish places. Everyone knew me. I built a following of over 6,000 people, which right now I'm still clearing out my friends list, because that following has allowed me to reach people more. But at the same time, when you think about it, it's like, maybe I misled those people, or what's the point of having over 7,000 followers if you're not going to engage with them, and if you don't believe in this work anymore? So So Father Bob's also carried that name, and there was always going to be one paranormal padre, right? There was always one paranormal padre in the room that Spanish speaking people already knew, and that was me. And that's not a boast, that's factual description of where each of us stood publicly. And this matters because it speaks to something deeper. We are two men with different relationships to visibility, to credit, and to the question of those whose name was on the mission. That tension doesn't disappear just because a ministry is created. It goes underground. That underground tensions eventually surface. You know? I write a lot on Substack, right?
I love it.
I write a lot on Substack, and the Substack post is this is what they're not. I write on Substack. I write from my own soul, from my own formation, my own reckoning with who I was and who I'm becoming. So those posts, they're not press releases. They're not accusations. They are a man working through his history, but I'm doing publicly because I feel the audience needs to know where I'm at, because that transparency is part of how I serve the people who follow this journey, who have followed me. Unfortunately, I've offended Father Bob with certain posts. He believed they were written about him because obviously the connotation padre. And I apologize. I genuinely did without reservation, because I didn't want to hurt my friend. I love him. He's my brother, and I love him. That is true. And it stays true. But I also have to be honest, though. I wrote as Padre Ken, Padre Torres. I write from the perspective of a Spanish-speaking priest reflecting on his own experience in the world he helped build. And none of those posts were ever about, Father Bob. They were about me. They were the pastoral truth underneath the conflict. So when a person reads themselves into a self-reflection written by someone else, that also tells you something. Not about the writer, but about what the reader is carrying. And I say that not to wound. I say it because it is clinically and spiritually accurate. If a mirror shows you something uncomfortable, that discomfort is yours. And I will not stop writing what is true. I will not self-censor my formation journey because it makes someone else uncomfortable, even if they operate in the same space. In the Orthodox tradition, we do not apologize for telling the truth. I apologize for the hurt, and I do not apologize for the words. Just like I've apologized, I've sent an email to Chris McKinnell. Whatever I've done in the past, that is kind of like this thing with, and I'm mentioning names, and I'm not being negative about it because I think it's important for people to understand it and put a picture. These aren't bad people. Not at all. These are just my experiences from what I've experienced, and more importantly, like I love Father Bob. He wanted to pursue his own endeavors. He is a retired Roman Catholic priest with his own identity, his own vision, his own desires, seen in a particular way. And that isn't a character attack. No, that is the human reality. Two men with two strong callings in a space that only has room for one. So the apostolate couldn't hold that tension. So also, the East and the West, we don't agree. We don't agree. This isn't a church preference. The theology, the Roman Catholic Church and the Orthodox Church are separated by real theological, substantial, unresolved theological divisions. The filioque, papal primacy and infallibility, the nature of tradition, sacramental theology, the very understanding of what the church is. So a joint apostolic ministry between a Roman Catholic priest and a man moving towards Holy Orthodox, it's a theological impossibility. Maybe we can collaborate at the surface, but we can't be one apostolate, without one theology. And as my Orthodox formation deepened, that impossibility, that was impossible to ignore. So, and then to be honest with you, my orthodoxy was inconvenient. I think my orthodoxy was the inconvenience that ended it all. As I moved deeper into my formation, as I began to see increasing clarity what the church actually is, what apostolic authority actually requires, what sacramental life actually demands, I became theologically uncomfortable. Someone felt I was too consumed by orthodoxy. So imagine that. I was too consumed by orthodoxy. right. So my pursuit of the fullness of the apostolic faith was treated as a character defect. So my deepening formation was framed as an imbalance, and my growing conviction was read as divisiveness. So,
Yeah.
and ultimately, at the end of the day, I didn't leave on my own. I was forced out. I was forced out. I helped create pages. I helped create things, and I felt like I was deceived. Don't tell me you're going to close a page down that I helped build, and you keep on using it for other people to promote other people, specifically promoting other people that we know in the paranormal field that are predators in nature. And this is not a condemnation. This is just for me, a conflict of interest. It's like, what can we do? So, but God knew what I did it. I hold two true things at the same time, because the Orthodox faith demands that kind of complexity. What happened for me, I feel like was unjust. I gave everything. I shut down my platforms. I was lied to. I was pushed out of something I helped build because my pursuit of the genuine faith became inconvenient. And the Lord knew exactly what he was doing. If I had not been pushed out, I would have kept giving. I would have kept sacrificing my presence, my platform, and energy for a mission that wasn't going to give me anything. That was not going to go where I needed to go. So I was too low to have
It's a
leaned
good
on my.
example of how God works in mysterious ways, and
Yeah.
we don't understand it. But looking back on it now, like you just said, had you not been pushed out of the apostolate, who knows where you would be at? You probably wouldn't be out of the paranormal. You might still have a
Right.
toe in.
Yeah,
And,
I mean, and we help, we help build you guys were a part of it. You guys saw the internal. You guys saw the amazing people that were part of that network. And to have that taken away from you, it was. I feel like it was unjust. And I'm sorry. The problem is people want to be coddled. People want them to be like, oh, baby. Nobody wants to be held accountable. It's like, okay, look, I'm telling the truth. This is my truth. This is my experience. And I have many other friends who have asked me the same thing about, why was this done to you? We can see it. And I just say, don't worry about it. Just pray for others. That's all that matters. God knows what he's doing. We don't hold on to grudges.
Maybe being on the road to emptying yourself and letting God take control of the heart, that's part of that cutting off, because he's going to cut that off. Because you've fully given yourself, I'm ready. I want to serve you. I am in the place I need to be in. And, those things just kind of reveal, the truth comes out, and he cuts that off for you.
Yeah.
So he can make room,
Yeah. I mean, you cannot do apostolic. Honestly, the truth is, you can't do apostolic ministry in a corrupted field, by being embedded in it. When the environment itself is spiritually toxic, presence without extraction becomes participation. And so my caller didn't protect me from the problems that this field has. It legitimized them.
So when did you realize, when did it hit you that you're done? I mean, what was the final aha moment that you're like, I'm walking away, this is it, I'm done?
Well, I mean, the fact that I was already leaning away towards the paranormal because of the hurt. I was tired of the teams. I was tired of the drama. I was tired of the fighting. And that thing just kind of wears on you. Imagine being, trying to be a good friend, trying to be a good steward, trying to be a good shepherd, a pastor, priest, whatever. And everyone within your circle is just fighting amongst one another. And everyone in your circle, within the same organizations are fighting with one another. And, they have their own opinions of what was done wrong to them. And I'm the guy that everybody comes to for advice. But at the same time, I was expected to pick a side, and it happened in every organization that I was a part of. I've always maintained that I don't ever get involved in drama. I'm not going to get involved in people's problems directly in that personal sense. I've advised people, and I even have a rule of thumb. If you're going to say something, if you're going to say a name during confession or prayer, whatever it is, just, be respectful about it, because this is, for me, this is important. I want to help guide you. So I've always had that rule when you talk to me about other people's, don't be negative. Don't slander them, don't defame them. Otherwise, this is not going to happen, this conversation. Just come to me with directly what you feel this person did wrong to you. And I got a lot of that, and I got tired. And even there were points in time where I was, by a good friend, I was asked to choose. And I go, I choose Christ. I choose Jesus. I choose this. And as I started forming and going into deeper into within Holy Orthodoxy, I began to see that this was completely incompatible. Like, what is this? Like, I have never heard of anything like this. I maintain friendships with everybody because that's just the type of guy that I am. It's like, imagine not liking me and I'm over here just feeding my dog who has cancer. You know what I mean? Imagine not liking me and unfriending me or saying these negative things about me when all I've ever been was charitable. I don't talk trash, I don't talk smack, and that's what this field is. And that's what I've noticed is that it attracts people with unresolved grief. There's a spiritual hunger without any stable tradition. People sense deeply that there's something beyond this material world, but have no liturgical container, no basis, no standing for that experience. Just the raw hunger, and nowhere safe to bring it. And I feel like that's what this paranormal world does. There's also this history of marginalization, and we'll get into that, the sensitivity, people with gifts and that sort of thing. But I've experienced, this duality within the paranormal field of, being a paranormal cleric and then all of a sudden being part of these religious communities. And the more I looked into it, it's like, wow, I'm exactly like that person. I am not trying to be like that person, but here I am, the same exact thing, except I've just been fortunate enough to have a broader reach. But you will know them by their fruits. I mean, I've seen some of the most weirdest and heinous things. Like, how can you say that you're a Catholic priest when you don't have a parish, when you're not tied into the church? Or how can you say you're a Catholic priest when all of a sudden you're doing shaman rituals at someone's house? Or how can you say you're some sort of priest? And that's, I feel like, once again, this is not an attack. This is not an attack on any specific individual. It's what I'm seeing and what I've experienced. This field is a cesspool of just individuals who have this hunger to help others, or sometimes it's misguided, but it's also a cesspool of predators. I've come across people who have the most heinous criminal backgrounds ever, and they're going into people's house and investigating, and they have their own shows and podcasts on networks. People who I've literally had to throw out from my old order, for lying, for having the most disgusting criminal record and not even talking about it. The past is the past. Yeah, it's forgiven, but even in ministry. So, what I've learned and what I've seen has definitely been a part of this formation. And I'm trying to empty myself of these things. And I would say that that's what this is. It's sort of like an emptying, because I've held on to this for a little over a year now, and I'm under canonical formation, and I don't have authority to speak theologically on orthodoxy. I could just speak about what I'm learning. And so what I'm learning is the emptying of the self, getting rid of the ego, getting rid of the pride. But more importantly, this paranormal field is not compatible with Holy Orthodoxy. The church fathers speak against it. You don't go out looking for demons. You don't go out intellectualizing and giving all these different names to these energies or whatever you think it is. You have this misguided thing. And the problem with the Western mindset is there's no phronema. There isn't a mindset of the church in that sense where everything is intellectualized. Holy Orthodoxy, it's a living, breathing experience. It starts in the heart first, and that's where I'm at right now. I've been so accustomed to this Western mindset, this Protestant mindset, and I don't mean that in a negative way, that it's been difficult for me to try to absorb what orthodoxy is. But what I am learning is the more you empty yourself, the more pride and ego you let go of, the Holy Spirit works within you, and that has just shown me what I need to see, what I need to see, and what is going to be beneficial for my spiritual growth.
Now you're out of the paranormal. You've left
Yep.
all that behind.
Yep.
What is your path now? What are you doing now?
So right now I'm being currently formed. I've been received into the OCA, Orthodox Church of America, the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. I'm currently under canonical formation under my spiritual father, which means that's exactly what it is. I am under obedience. I have to pray. I have to study. I have to read. I have to understand what the mindset of the church is. And it's not just reading. It's not just memorizing. It's living it. Because Orthodoxy is this living, breathing expression of the faith. And I know you guys are learning that as well. I'm a catechumen. I'm getting ready for baptism. I'm in formation, going to the liturgy at the local church, which is the advice, which is the spiritual direction of my spiritual fathers. Going to the liturgy because the heart is the liturgy. That's the important part of the church. That's the most important thing is the liturgy because it is heaven on earth. So learning that, experiencing it, being under canonical formation, opening up the chapel of the Theotokos, simultaneously leading away from that Western mindset to have my flock now understand Orthodoxy. So it has been a very, very humbling experience. I have struggled, but it's worth it. It's necessary. This is what the church demands. This is what the church requires. And this is what I'm going to do. I am under strict obedience. I am under canonical formation. And Lord willing, I'm waiting. I'm waiting for the Orthodox seminary to get back to me. My hierarch sent out a letter. There is a Spanish theology course. It's 2 semesters long, and I am going to take it to learn Orthodoxy better in Spanish, because La Capilla del Theotokos, the chapel of the Theotokos, is just that. It is meant to be a Spanish mission. I am Spanish by blood, by nature. I am Puerto Rican. The language runs through me. So I want to bring Orthodoxy to the Spanish community. And so the paranormal field has helped me out because it's given me a broad reach. And, I've gotten a lot of wonderful support. You guys have been a wonderful supporter. And for supporting me, I want to show something to your audience. You guys are so gracious to help me out with this mission. And look how beautiful this is.
Wow.
This is the back piece that's going to go on the altar. And I've had some people, a friend who has agreed to help build an iconostasis for free. I've got other people that are freaking wonderful people, tattoo artists, who are supporting me because I met him at a Paracon a few years ago. And so this field, although I've left it, it's left me with wonderful relationships. And so that's where I'm at right now.
Why did you choose Orthodoxy? What led you there?
Why did I choose Orthodoxy?
Or why did it? Yeah.
I was at a low. Yeah, you know what? It's weird. I was at a low point in my life where I was struggling with my faith. I was struggling with where I was at canonically with the church, with what I was believing. I was just so confused about everything that was happening in my life, because I also, being an old rite Catholic, that is accepted, right? A legitimacy, it's a legitimate thing. And so I was going, to the Catholic Church, and, I'm also a part of Knights of Columbus, which is a Catholic fraternal organization for men. And so I've been working through that as well. But one day I decided I was going to go to this small church down the street from my house. I was like, what is that? It's a small, tiny church. I go, what is it? It had a little dome on it with the cross, with the weird looking cross on it. I go, what's that? Okay, I'll check it out. I went in. Everybody was standing. They were doing the sign of the cross backwards. Just the incense, the smells, the chanting. I was like, what is this? And I went up to go take the Eucharist. And the priest was like, no, I don't know you. You're not a parishioner. You're not Orthodox. And I go, what? I'm Christian. No, go. Okay. So I sat. And at the end of the day, at the end of the service, they give the bread with the wine that you can eat. And I go, what is this? And I go, why is this so long? Why is this, like orthos and matins and vespers? It's like 2.5 hours of service of standing up or sitting down, as opposed to 2 hours of a Catholic mass, two different services, as opposed to one service. I was flabbergasted. I didn't know what this was. I mean, I've heard of Eastern Catholicism. No, I've heard of other parts of the church. I was like, oh, this must be another branch of Roman Catholicism. And boy, was I wrong. And so this was about 2 years ago, right? About 2 years, actually, beginning of last year. I'm lying. Lord forgive me for being a liar. Beginning of last year, January. And I was like, what is this? And I was like, okay, I have to know more. And so that's where I was hooked, while going through all of these transitions, and then I reached out to a couple of jurisdictions. I reached out to the Russian Orthodox Church, to the Antiochian churches, and I go, this is who I am, They vetted my credentials, my education. They're like, that's great, wonderful, great, perfect. Are you Orthodox? What do you know about Orthodox? And nothing. So eventually I ended up getting an email from the hierarch who put me in connection with a spiritual father who now is my spiritual father. And since July of last year, been going through this formation, a catechumen and understanding. Nothing that I knew, everything that I have means nothing in the church. And that's a very humbling experience, and it's like, I think the Lord chose me, drew me to Orthodoxy because it's very methodical, not in a sense, but like there's structure. And as military guys, we like structure. We're like, boom, 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 boom. This is great. But every little thing that's done in the liturgy is meaningful and it has a purpose and the reason why. And I'm like, my goodness. And so that's where I'm at right now. That's where I'm at.
That's beautiful.
Praise be to God for all that.
Praise be to God. May I be blessed.
Do you still keep in contact with anybody from Paranormal?
Yeah, I mean, like, I've been cleaning out my friends list little by little, but I have a few friends that I talk to almost every other day or so that call me up. People that know that I'm no longer part of this field, but they still call me for advice. They still call me for prayer. I am a board certified mental health coach. I've been a chaplain, and so I just try to still help people in that sense. Like, I am still living my ministry as I'm going through this formation, as I'm going through this transition. And it can be challenging, but the Lord's will be done.
Man,
To keep in contact with you guys.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Tell us more about the chapel that you're starting, how that came about, all the blessings, all the surprises, all the here.
Right. So the Lord's will be done. May I be blessed. I thank God every day for this opportunity because, I was at a point a few years ago where there was that illegitimacy and the order that wasn't valid, and this Anglican communion that I became a part of, which technically I've been released. My bishop has released me to the Orthodox Church. It kind of just gave me a little more understanding. Hey, little buddy. Sorry. Gave me a little more understanding of what the direction was where God needed me to be. But I needed to be completely humbled first because for many years, I've been trying to open up a chapel. Like, I've been reaching out to places. I've been trying to plant seeds and nothing has just been coming into fruition. And as soon as I became a part of this jurisdiction, I told my spiritual fathers, this is what I want to do. I want to have a church. Either way, even before converting to Orthodoxy, the goal was to always open a church, open a chapel. Now that was my dream. It was going to be the Solomonic Order of Saint Michael the Archangel, a long name, but it no longer exists. And so that kind of the shift focus. But I knew that I wanted to have a physical space to where I can worship God and bring people to the church. And so, after this transition, this formation that I'm going through, I feel like the doors kind of just opened up a little bit. I reached out to a couple of other places, the local churches, and nothing. And I met one local church, and Pastor Sarah Steerhouse, First Disciples of Christ Church here for First Christian Church in Vallejo. They're like, we have an old chapel that we don't use anymore. And I go, you don't say? Yeah. Okay, cool. Like, how much do you want for it or whatever? You know what I mean? I went to other places and the churches were like, because they're hurting, it's like, oh, it's $300 or $400 a month. I go, I can't afford that. So this church is like, look, we'll give you this space. You can do with it whatever you want for $150 a month. And I go, no way. But I go, first, I got to check, because it says in the scripture, thunder from the east, that sort of thing, Revelation. Went in, right? The altar is facing exactly east. There was another room that they had, but it was like, oh, okay, no, it's kind of close to the main church. I was like, I kind of wanted away private. Sure enough, we go up, the altar is facing east. And I go, praise be to God. This is it. So that's where we're at right now. I've only been there a few times because I'm not authorized to administrate the liturgy, but I'm still giving Western Rite sacraments, Anglicanism, from the Anglican Rite. But I felt the Holy Spirit and God be like, no, you're transitioning into Orthodoxy of this is the truth. This is the way. You have to cease all communion. So I do communion here at home with my wife and myself until I'm baptized, chrismated, received into the Orthodox Church.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So at the end of this, is there a place where people could like donate or help?
Yeah. So I do have, the church does have an official PayPal account. We are a legally registered church of business. So, I can share the link with you guys later.
So in the paranormal field, do you feel like people are being manipulated or misled in any way?
Oh man. So I'm going to speak as a mental health professional, a priest, and a man who lived every word of this. First we need to understand who the field recruits and why. The people who end up in this world tend to share a specific psychological profile. Most of it is unresolved grief, like a loss of a parent, child, spouse, or friend. There's also this spiritual hunger without a stable tradition. Like there are people who sense deeply that there's something beyond the world, and I've said beyond the material world, and I'm going to repeat it again, but there's no basis on it. There's also this, and I think we suffer from it too, this caretaker identity. People want to help, right? It's not just a virtue, it's a need. People who feel most fully themselves are when they are needed by others, and it's not an evil thing. It's very beautiful. It's often beautiful, but it also can lead into being leveraged, right? And then there's also this trauma histories, there's this adrenaline of investigation, this sense of tribal belonging and the sense of purpose in a dark mission, right? These serve as trauma management strategies. They make dysregulation feel like a calling rather than a wound, right? And I had nearly all of these, a veteran with unprocessed experience, a pastoral heart that needed to be needed, deep identification with marginalized communities, a spiritual hunger not yet fully fed. And, I wasn't recruited by accident. I was exactly what the field needed, and that's exactly what they recruit. So yes, manipulation. You don't need a deliberate conspiracy to create a manipulative system, The manipulation can be entirely emergent, it can be built into the culture. It's normalized over decades, operating through social pressure. So the impact is identical, whether the manipulation is conscious or structural. So we'll lead into the proximity, right? Proximity to legacy as currency. You're part of something historic, and that framing produces loyalty that overrides judgment. So questioning the organization feels like a betrayal of the legacy, so the questions stop, Then all of a sudden the information gap is managed deliberately. At entry level, you have just enough access to feel valued and never enough to be fully independent. Then the dissent is spiritualized. When you raise a concern, it's reframed as a failure of loyalty or ingratitude. And in a spiritually infected organization, that framing also implies you are failing God. Imagine that. Then we have this identity absorption. At some point, your titles become your identity. When the organization is that thoroughly fused with who you are, leaving doesn't feel like a professional change. It feels like dying. And that's kind of like what it felt like for me. That was that manipulation. But that's what happens. You're in trauma bonding. There's this idealization. You're valued. Then there's a devaluation. Something shifts. So then, there's a recommitment because you feel like you did something wrong. So you work harder. You prove your loyalty. And there's this intermediate reinforcement, which is psychologically powerful than consistent reinforcement. It's a reward schedule. You do something good, I'm going to reward you. You're loyal, I'm going to reward you. You do something wrong, you don't get rewarded. It's very, 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 very dark, and it's very sinister. When I finally left, I thought I was leaving a career, but what I was actually living was a constructed identity, a social ecosystem, a purpose, a narrative, a trauma bond, all at once, with no transition plan and no community waiting on the other side. And I feel like this is something that we can all, identify with, right? Being in the paranormal, you leave the paranormal, it's like we lose our tribe, we lose our friends, we lose those connections. So, and the truth is that the wound and the belonging are the same thing. The place that hurt me was also the place I called home. Imagine that. The place that hurt you is the place you called home, and that's what makes these exits from an environment so poorly understood by people who have never been in one. So if you are in this field and this is landing, that recognition is not a coincidence. That is the field exactly as it's designed to work. That's the field working designed as it's designed. You are not trapped, but you need to know what you're actually dealing with. There is manipulation. Along with manipulation, we also see this authority problem, right? And I feel like we all seen that investigator to come in with the holy water in the name of Jesus Christ. I rebuke all demonic entities. It's not going to do anything. You have no authority. There's no spiritual authority. You can say a prayer for yourself, but even then, every paranormal investigation rests on an implicit claim that the team has the standing, the knowledge, and the authority to engage whatever is present. And that claim is almost never true. So this is where the faith comes in. In Orthodox theology, authority over the demonic is not a personal quality. It is not conferred by courage, experience, sensitivity, or intention. It is conferred through the church, through the holy orders, and through the sacramental life of the unbroken apostolic succession of the church. And my kitty decided he was going to jump in front of the camera. So, and then we have this false sense of protection, well, I'm going to burn sage. I'm going to do holy water. I'm going to do a tiki rain dance. It's not working. It's not going to work, No. Most of the time we go into spaces with approximations. That's really what it is. So the thing is, there is a demonic strategy. The demonic does not need dramatic possession. What it needs is persistent, voluntary, repeated access. And paranormal investigations provides that access on a scheduled basis with consistent under the framework of helping people or helping spirits cross over. That's the helpful part of the tragedy. Yeah, tragedy. You're going to go because you want to help. That's motivation, and that's genuine. And that's exactly what's being exploited. So, the pastoral harm to clients is something that I grieve specifically. People who invited me into their homes in their most frightened moments, we came with equipment and we had intentions, but not the authority that we thought we had. And in some cases, I believe we made things worse, not because we were bad people, because we were wrong instrument. And that's what this field does. It makes you think you have authority. It makes you think that just because you watch a YouTube video or you download a PDF prayer that you have authority, that you can control the spirits and this and that. No, you cannot control the spirits. Okay. I don't care who you are, who you think you are. You do not have authority to control spirits. Now, then this false ideology. Well, I believe in angels, but I don't believe in demons, or I believe in demons, but I don't believe in angels. Oh, I don't believe in God, but I believe in angels. Really? That is just the most ideological thought process to have. Oh, I don't believe in God, but I believe in angels and demons. Well, you can't have one without the other. We look at history, we look at the teachings of the church, the divine council, thinking orthodoxy, angels, demons, all that stuff go hand in hand with God. These things are real. And to say you don't believe in one and not believe in the other, I mean, it's come on now.
It's not a la carte. You can't just pick and choose what
right.
you want.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that gets people confused is demons. They don't have to, like you said, they don't have to make it a big theatric attack. They don't.
Yeah.
All they have to do is just distract you from God, which is so simple to do. They do it with all of these gadgets and investigations and all of these wondering thoughts of
Popularity.
Popularity, or coming up with an answer for these paranormal experiences, and that's all they have to do to distract you from God, and that's their whole mission. I mean, it doesn't have to be a big movie scene attack. It's
Yeah. I mean, and I feel like the West has popularized that. I see people all the time. Well, I've never encountered a demon in 15 years in investigation. Yeah, you probably did, but you just can't recognize it because they already got you where they want you. There's arrogance, there's ego, there's pride. You have a misunderstanding of what a demon is and what it isn't. A demon's not going to say, "Oh, here I am, a demon. Here I am. I'm going to dance in front of you." It doesn't work like that. Most people have probably encountered a demon and have not recognized it because why? They're already trapped into that mindset. They're already engaging with spirits. They're setting up equipment. They're doing all of these different things. And sometimes the demon doesn't have to present itself as evidence. It's just there watching you. It's there to send you this false idea, like, oh yeah.
Or it's not going to show up as something ugly.
It's going to attack the mind. It's going to make you think it's Uncle John when it isn't.
Yes. Or the most simple thing, all it has to do is turn a light on or make a little noise. That's it. Yeah. Something so small,
that's really what it is.
And that's where the addiction is formed right there.
Well, yeah, and that also leads into this ideology of this paranormal unity. Everybody's got a different process. Everybody's got a different idea, a different belief. The paranormal field's implicit creed. There is something beyond the physical world. Different traditions have different words for it. All of those ways are valid. We unite around the shared experience of the unexplained. And that sounds like tolerance, but theologically speaking, it's perennialism, right? The view that all spiritual paths are equally valid approaches the same ultimate reality, that this directly contradicts the incarnation, because the claim of the incarnation is, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except for me. So, I was present, for blessing ceremonies with priests and Wiccans and ordained ministers. They sit in the same place, with their respective rituals. I participated in joint prayers where theological frameworks were not just different, but incompatible in foundation. I watched homeowners, frightened, desperate, spiritually vulnerable people be told that whatever was being done in their homes carried spiritual authority because the intention was good. See, the intention was good, the hearts were sincere, but the authority was absent. So, who knows what was going on? And then that's the thing. All of this is covered under the therapeutic silencer of we're all just trying to help. It weaponizes compassion. The moment you raise a theological concern, you're framed as someone who prioritizes doctrine over people. Right? But interestingly enough, people don't want Christians or priests or whatever, but all of a sudden, Father, can you pray for me? I feel like I have something demonic. Really? Or that team calls you back and say, can you do a prayer or a blessing? But wait, you didn't want our opinion. You didn't want our input. So, I mean, it happens. That just shows the breakdown in logic. So, well, and I feel like with that could lead into another problem that we often see in the field. All of this ecumenism, all of this ideology, all of this self-interpretation, someone's got to be in charge. Someone's got to have, authority over it, right? So that's where I feel like psychics come in. They're the field's theologians, right? Equipment records data, but psychic provides meaning. What is the entity? What does it want? Is it dangerous? Every question that actually matters defers to the psychic. That's what makes psychics simultaneously priests, prophets, and a theologian. They determine the spiritual nature of what is present and guide the response to it. And that's enormous responsibility. And the truth is, they carry no apostolic authority, no sacramental grounding, no theological accountability, and in most cases, no coherent spiritual framework beyond their own subjective experience. And I'm going to say this respectfully. There's no such thing as a Christian psychic at all. There isn't. The church teaches that this is evil. There are no psychics. You're not to confer with psychics. You can have gifts, you can have abilities, but it's got to be for the edification of the church. We have wonderful examples of saints who are given gifts of foresight who can heal, but that wasn't asked for. It happened on the spot while they were praying, while they were talking to other people. So if you are a Christian and you are seeing this podcast, which I'm going to share my personal profile, don't be upset with me, but this is the truth. There is no such thing as a Christian psychic. Yeah, do I believe people have gifts? Yes, I believe that God can depart those gifts to specific people, but it's got to be in a controlled environment. It's got to be for the edification of the church. It has to be within the confines of the church. Everything else, I feel like, is either confirmation bias or some sort of deception. Once again, there are rare certain circumstances and rare instances where people are allowed to see certain things, but you have to ask yourself your question. If this is a rare and special gift, then why do over 100 million people in the world proclaim to have it? And why is it a $2.2 billion industry? Think about that.
Yeah.
Someone accused me of pre-list. Oh, you're just mad because you don't have psychic abilities. No, I'm not. I'm not upset. I'm calling out the truth. What makes you think? And most of the people who have these abilities, allegedly, most of them are people who are not even stable. People who like Dungeons and Dragons and live in fantasies and love fairies and pixie dust. They live in the nights of medieval nights, and they live in the basements with their parents. They have fallen and broken relationships. They're paying child support. They can't eat. They have no money. They have no food. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying that to criticize them, but that shows you the mindset. Am I really to trust a person who doesn't have even their own personal affairs in order? Like, would you trust me if all of my life is falling apart and I'm being destructive to myself and I have no accountability, no responsibility? Like, would you trust me to give you advice? No. Why would I give you
People do.
advice? Right.
Because they're desperate. People do because they're desperate.
And
so they overlook all of it.
And it's a $2.2 billion industry. I'm sorry. Look at, I have a Substack post and I talk about this in depth, right? We all have this gift of intuition. It's a scientific gift. It's like the nous. It's spiritual intellect. It's the eyes of the soul. Most of us, we are built in God's image, and we all have this ability to sense things. Like we can walk into the room and say it's off or something doesn't feel right, but that's it, right? The moment we start saying, "Oh, it's Uncle John" or this and that, that's problematic because now you're going into trying to discern what's in the space. We all have this capability of saying, something's wrong, something doesn't feel right. It's a gut feeling. That's part of it. And even psychology can attest to it. But at the same time, too, when we walk into a room, our mind is processing 1,000 different things at the same time, right? And based upon our brain processing those things, we can come up with certain assumptions. We can come up with certain things. We can say, well, something happened in here because, oh, look at the table is messed up. There's blood, or whatever it is. We have that basic understanding of like a gut feeling, right? But that's the thing, though. There's a clinical reality. It's cold reading, hot reading, and it's also what we call the Barnum effect. And these are well-documented psychological phenomena. The psychic skills, the strategic use, it's an ambiguous language, right? It's the human mind. So this works because the human mind is in grief patterns, right? It's the human mind in grief is a pattern completing machine. That means that the client's own knowledge, grief, and hope do most of the work. The psychic provides the framework and the confirmation. These people going home believing they spoke to their dead child, their dead parent, their dead spouse, and making decisions based on that belief. They've been harmed regardless of the psychic's intentions. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, your grandmother is here and she loves you and she's at peace. The comfort is real. and the grief soothes it all. But the spiritual door, though, it was just open, right? And it's not your grandmother walking through it. Yeah.
No.
Divination actually is the attempt to obtain spiritual information from the sources other than God through means other than sacramental life. That is wrong. Divination is condemned throughout the scriptures, and Leviticus, Deuteronomy, Isaiah, exactly the apostles, and the prohibition is not incidental; it's structural, because you're not going to get what you think it is. And then we have these celebrity psychics, everybody who makes a living off of these things. I've met many people that are just wonderful people, just in their own sense. But this idea that they're psychics and that they're mediums, and even if they are to be accurate, let's say they are 100% accurate, it may not be a divine gift from God, because demons, the demonic, can show you and reveal things to you as well. So
just when those familiar spirits come into play.
Yeah, all of that nonsense, all of that garbage, familiar spirit, or it's my ancestors coming through. No, it's none of that. It's demonic. It's demonic. And I'm sorry, and I'm not trying to be arrogant or egotistical, but I'm going to trust a 2,000-year-old institution that has experience in these things than 50 or 40 years of YouTube video, 50 years of whatever is coming on the paranormal in the last 10, 15 years of YouTube. What do you call those things? Influencers. It's stupid. People believe people that have experience, and the experiences are real. The experiences are real. We're not saying they're not real. The experiences are real. These things happen. We sense, we see these things. We get attacked, but that doesn't negate that just because the experiences are real, you're handling it the wrong way. So the church has the ultimate authority to deal with these things. I'm sorry. I would say, though, there are other cultures, maybe older, that have, knowledge in dealing with these things. But the truth is, the church has the authority for these things. And that's kind of where I'm at with that. At the end of the day, I'm looking for the Orthodox answer. I'm looking for kenosis. I'm looking for the self-emptying. That's what I'm looking for, because I want God to fill this self-vacated space. I want God to fill my soul. And if you're in the paranormal field and you're looking for all of these things, you're not going to find it there. Come home, come to church, and don't give me the excuse that the church hurt me. The church itself, people hurt you, humans hurt you, but the divine institution within itself, Jesus Christ, he hasn't hurt you. We have to stop making excuses to come home to the faith. And everybody always has an excuse. Oh, the church hurt me. Well, my boss made me upset. That doesn't mean I don't go to work. I need to work so that I can provide for my family. It's the same thing with the church. You come to church, you come to the Eucharist, you come to the sacraments, and you participate in these things, because that's the most important thing. That is the fulfillment you're going to get. You're going to trust experience. Experience doesn't mean expertise. Here's an example. I could have gone to the emergency room 30 times for a leg injury, for a broken bone. Does that mean I'm an orthopedic surgeon? And that's the problem. People are relegating experience to expertise, and it's not true. And people are walking around with haunted objects and dolls and all these sorts of things. That's another conversation for another day. That it's just ridiculous. But at the end of the day, I became useless. I became useless to other people because I'm no longer useful to them. Therefore, I no longer exist to them. And that is perfectly fine, because I have experienced this, because orthodoxy is changing me. I've helped build ministries, not so much, ministries. I've helped, reach out to other people around the world. But there's an isolation that you feel. But at the end of the day, I praise God and I thank God, because this is the life I'm going on. And I'm going to follow it. I'm going to pursue the church. I'm going to pursue my calling. And I am done with the paranormal. I am done with the drama. I am done with this fake science. I am done, because none of it is true. It's going to harm your soul, and it's going to lead your soul to be lost. Ask yourself what their fruits are. Why are you always having trouble? with your relationship? Why are you always getting fired? Why are you always struggling for something? I mean, something good should be fruitful, right? In my experience, based upon what I see on social media, people just have problems after problems after problems after problems. Why? Because they're involved in this field, and those with ego and pride, they're not gonna live anytime soon, because it's also money for them. It gives them what they need.
Yeah.
And so that is my martyria. That is my martyrdom. This is my story. Thank you for listening.